You're sitting in your living room. A stranger walks through your front door, sits on your couch, and refuses to leave. You call the police. They show up, look at the situation, and tell you there's nothing they can do. The stranger isn't trespassing. They're a squatter, and in America, they might have more legal protection than you do. This isn't a hypothetical. It's happening right now in every state to homeowners who thought they understood property rights. And the system designed to protect tenants has become a weapon that destroys lives. February 2023, Queens, New York. Adele Andaloro inherited her family home after her mother passed away. The house had been in her family for decades. She was in the process of selling it. The price was agreed. The closing date was set. Everything was going according to plan. Then she drove by the property for a routine check. The locks had been changed. There were people inside. Strangers, living in her mother's house. She called the police. They told her it was a civil matter. She'd have to go through the courts. The eviction process in New York can take months, sometimes over a year. The closing date for her sale would pass. The buyer would walk away. She'd lose everything. So Adele did what any desperate homeowner would do. She changed the locks back. She entered her own home, and when the police returned, they arrested her. Not the squatters. The legal owner of the property was taken away in handcuffs while strangers remained inside her house. The story went viral. The outrage was immediate and visceral. How could this happen in America? How could someone break into your home and the law would protect them instead of you? But here's what most people don't understand. This isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature. And it's been built over centuries of legal precedent that most homeowners have never heard of. The concept of squatters' rights isn't new. It's ancient. It goes back to Roman law and something called adverse possession. The basic idea was simple and, in its original context, actually made sense. If land sat abandoned for years, unused and unclaimed, and someone else came along and improved it, worked it, lived on it, paid taxes on it, then after a certain period, they could claim legal ownership. This wasn't about rewarding criminals. It was about productive use of land in an era when property records were unreliable and landowners might disappear for decades. In medieval England, this became codified. The time period was originally set at 60 years. If you occupied land openly, continuously, and without the owner's permission for 60 years, it became yours. Later, this was reduced to 20 years, then 12. The American colonies inherited this legal framework, and it made sense in the context of a frontier nation where land records were chaotic, surveys were imprecise, and boundary disputes were constant. But something changed in the 20th century. America urbanized, property records became digitized, title insurance became standard. You could verify property ownership in minutes. The original justification for adverse possession, that we needed a way to resolve unclear ownership claims, largely disappeared. But the laws remained, and they evolved in ways the framers never intended. By the 1970s and 80s, tenant rights movements pushed for stronger protections against landlord abuses. These protections were necessary and good. Landlords were throwing tenants out on the street with no notice, sometimes changing locks while people were at work, leaving families homeless. So, states passed laws requiring formal eviction processes. You couldn't just throw someone out even if they stopped paying rent. You had to go through the courts. You had to prove your case. You had to give notice. These laws protected vulnerable people from predatory landlords. But here's where it gets twisted. These tenant protections began to merge with adverse possession laws in dangerous ways. If someone could prove they had been living in a property, even illegally, even as a squatter, courts started treating them like tenants, which meant property owners had to go through the full eviction process, which could take months, sometimes years. And during that entire time, the squatter lives in your property for free while you pay the mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance, and the legal fees to remove them. The time periods for adverse possession got shorter. In California, it's 5 years. In Florida, 7. But in many states, squatters don't even need to wait that long to gain legal protections. They just need to establish residency. And here's the truly insane part. In some jurisdictions, that can happen in as little as 30 days, 1 month. A stranger breaks into your property, stays for 30 days, and suddenly they have legal rights that require a court process to remove. The mechanics of how this works reveal just how broken the system has become. When police respond to a squatter call, they face a dilemma. Is this a criminal trespass or a civil dispute? If the person inside has no documents, no keys, and just broke in yesterday, that's clearly criminal. But if they've been there for a few weeks and they show the police a fake lease, or a utility bill with their name on it, or even just a piece of mail delivered to that address, many police departments will call it a civil matter and refuse to get involved. They'll tell the property owner to hire a lawyer and go to court. This is where professional squatters thrive. They know the system. They know the laws better than most homeowners. They target vacant properties, houses and probate homes between tenants, vacation properties. They break in, change the locks, and immediately establish the appearance of legitimate residency. They file fake leases. They have mail sent to the address. Some even forge utility bills. In Florida, squatters have been known to file fraudulent property deeds at the county recorder's office, claiming ownership. And until a court sorts it out, they're living in your house. The stories pile up like a horror anthology. In Atlanta, a homeowner returned from military deployment to find squatters in his house. It took him 8 months and $12,000 in legal fees to evict them. When they finally left, the house was destroyed. Walls punched through, copper pipes ripped out, human waste in the bedrooms. His insurance didn't cover it because the damage was done by residents, not vandals. In New Jersey, a landlord found squatters in his rental property after his tenant moved out. The squatters claimed the previous tenant had sublet to them. The tenant denied it. While the case worked through housing court, the squatters lived rent-free for 14 months. But to understand why this system has become so exploitative, and why it's accelerating, we have to look at the economics driving it and the legal loopholes that have turned squatting from a rare occurrence into an organized scam. The transformation of squatting from opportunistic trespassing into organized fraud happened quietly, but the signs were always there. Social media accelerated everything. By 2020, TikTok and YouTube were filled with videos explaining exactly how to squat in someone else's property. The titles were shameless. How to live rent-free legally? Squatters' rights explained. Free housing loophole the government doesn't want you to know. These weren't fringe videos. Some had millions of views. The comment sections were filled with people sharing tips, comparing state laws, recommending which types of properties were easiest to target. The playbook became standardized. Step 1, find a vacant property. Foreclosures are ideal. So are states in probate, vacation homes, or rentals between tenants. Step 2, break in discreetly. Don't smash windows, pick the lock, or find an unlocked door. The goal is to avoid obvious signs of forced entry. Step 3, change the locks immediately. Step 4, establish the appearance of residency, get mail delivered. Set up utilities if possible. Create a fake lease agreement. Make it look legitimate. Step 5, wait. If the owner shows up, show them your fake documents and refuse to leave. Tell them to take you to court. Step 6, profit. Live rent free for months while the legal system grinds through the eviction process. The economics are brutally simple. For the squatter, it's all upside. Free housing for months, sometimes over a year. Even if they eventually get evicted, they pay nothing. No security deposit, no first and last month's rent, no utility bills if they can avoid them. The average cost to squat, $0. The average time before eviction, 6 to 18 months depending on the state. That's thousands of dollars in free rent, and there's almost no criminal penalty. In most cases, squatting itself isn't prosecuted. By the time the eviction happens, the squatter just moves to the next property and starts over. For the property owner, it's all downside. The average cost to evict a squatter in America is between $3,000 and $10,000 in legal fees. That doesn't include lost rent, property damage, or the mortgage and taxes you're still paying while someone else lives in your house. If the property was being sold, you lose the sale. If it was a rental, you lose months of income. And the damage squatters leave behind can be catastrophic. We're not talking about normal wear and tear. We're talking about destroyed plumbing, stripped copper wiring, holes in walls, floors ruined by neglect. Some owners have found their properties turned into drug dens or brothels. The cleanup costs can exceed $50,000. The math creates a perverse incentive structure. For squatters, especially those with nothing to lose, it's rational behavior. Free housing with minimal risk. For property owners, it's a nightmare they can't wake up from. And the courts, overwhelmed and understaffed, become the bottleneck that makes the whole scam possible. Let's talk about Florida because it's become ground zero for the squatter crisis. Florida has relatively short adverse possession requirements and a massive vacation home market. Properties sit empty for months, owners live out of state, it's perfect hunting ground. In 2023, Florida reported over 15,000 squatter-related cases. That number is likely underreported because many property owners settle or pay squatters to leave rather than go through the court process. Yes, you read that correctly. Some owners pay squatters to leave. It's called cash for keys. A property owner, desperate to regain their home, offers the squatter money to vacate voluntarily, usually between $500 and $3,000. It's extortion, but it's legal extortion. And for many owners, it's cheaper and faster than eviction. The squatter gets paid to stop committing what should be a crime. The system rewards the criminal and punishes the victim. This is America in 2024. The legal framework that enables this is a patchwork of state laws that were never designed to work together. Adverse possession laws were meant for edge cases, long-term disputes over unclear boundaries. Tenant protection laws were meant to prevent landlords from throwing legitimate renters onto the street. But when you combine them, you create a system where someone who breaks into your house gets treated like someone you invited in. The burden of proof falls on the wrong party. In a rational system, if someone is in your property without your permission, they should have to prove they have a right to be there. But in many jurisdictions, it works backwards. The property owner, have to prove they don't have a right to be there. You have to prove the lease is fake. You have to prove they're not a tenant. You have to prove you didn't give them permission. And while you're gathering evidence and filing motions, they're living in your house. The court process itself is designed for landlord-tenant disputes, not criminal trespass. You file an eviction notice. You wait for a court date. The squatter can request continuances, claim they never received proper notice, file counter motions. Each delay adds weeks or months, and judges bound by tenant protection laws often err on the side of caution. Better to let someone stay a little longer than to wrongly throw out a legitimate tenant. That caution is weaponized by professional squatters who know exactly how to game the system. Some states have started to fight back, but the reforms are inadequate. In 2024, Florida passed a law allowing property owners to file an affidavit with the sheriff's office stating that someone is squatting in their property. The sheriff can then remove the squatter without a court order. It sounds good on paper, but the law has loopholes. If the squatter has any document suggesting tenancy, even a fake lease, the sheriff won't act. It's back to court. The law helps in clear-cut cases but does nothing about sophisticated squatters. Georgia passed a similar law, so did North Carolina. But these are band-aids on a system that's hemorrhaging. The fundamental problem isn't the speed of eviction. It's that we're using eviction processes for people who should be arrested for breaking and entering. Trespassing is a crime. Burglary is a crime, but if you break into a house and stay there long enough, it magically becomes a civil matter. The logic is insane. Meanwhile, the real estate industry is adapting in dark ways. Property owners are installing sophisticated security systems on vacant homes, cameras, alarms, reinforced locks. Some are hiring property management companies that do daily drive-bys. Others are paying people to house sit just to keep the property occupied. All of this costs money. All of it is a response to a problem that shouldn't exist. The insurance industry has noticed too. Home insurance policies are adding exclusions for damage caused by squatters. Landlord insurance premiums are rising in states with severe squatter problems. Title insurance companies are issuing warnings about fraudulent deeds filed by squatters. The entire property ecosystem is warping around this crisis, and the costs are being passed down to everyone. But the human cost is what really matters. We're not just talking about financial losses, we're talking about psychological trauma. Imagine working your entire life to buy a home and then watching strangers live in it while the police tell you there's nothing they can do. Imagine inheriting your parents' house filled with memories and family heirlooms, and then being locked out by criminals who claim they have rights. Imagine being arrested for entering your own property because a squatter called the police on you. This breaks people. Some property owners have had nervous breakdowns. Some have lost their homes entirely because they couldn't afford the legal fight. Some have taken desperate, illegal action and ended up in jail themselves. And here's the cruelest irony. The laws that enable this were meant to protect vulnerable people. Tenant rights laws exist because landlords used to abuse tenants. Adverse possession exists because, theory, it promotes productive use of abandoned land. But both have been perverted into tools that protect the worst actors and harm innocent property owners. The vulnerable people these laws were meant to help are often the ones most hurt by squatters because they can't afford the legal battle to take their property back. The question everyone asks is the same. How did we get here? How did America, with its foundational belief in property rights, create a system where criminals have more protection than owners? The answer isn't simple, but it reveals something deeply broken about how our legal system has evolved and who it actually serves. The answer lies in the gap between how laws are written and how they're enforced, between the intent of legislation and the reality of implementation, between what we think the system does and what it actually does. American property law was built on the assumption of good faith, the assumption that people would follow the rules, that courts could distinguish between legitimate disputes and obvious fraud, that police would protect property owners from criminals. But assumptions aren't enough when criminals learn to exploit the system faster than the system can adapt. Consider what happens when a squatter is finally evicted. In theory, they should face consequences. Fraud charges for fake leases, criminal trespass charges for unauthorized entry, theft charges for unpaid utilities. But prosecutions are rare. District attorneys have limited resources and prioritize violent crimes. A squatter case requires gathering evidence, proving intent, and building a criminal case. It's easier to let it remain a civil matter. So the squatter walks away, faces no jail time, pays no restitution, and moves on to the next property. The system has no teeth. This creates a category of professional criminals who operate with near impunity. Some have squatted in dozens of properties over years. They're not homeless people seeking shelter. They're scam artists running a con, and they're organized. Online forums and social media groups share information about which states have the weakest laws, which counties have the slowest courts, which types of properties are easiest to target. There are Discord servers and Telegram channels where squatters trade tips like day traders sharing stock picks. The level of sophistication is stunning. In New York City, investigators uncovered a network of squatters working together. They'd identify vacant properties, break in as a group, and then rent out rooms to unsuspecting people who thought they were dealing with legitimate landlords. The squatters collected rent from multiple tenants while paying nothing to the actual owner. When the real owner discovered what was happening and started eviction proceedings, the squatters had already collected tens of thousands of dollars. By the time the eviction was complete, they disappeared. The people they'd scammed, the sub-tenants, were left with nowhere to go, and the property owner was left with a destroyed building and no way to recover losses. This is the dark evolution of the squatter crisis. It's no longer just about free housing. It's about organized fraud, identity theft, and exploitation layered on top of exploitation. And the legal system is so slow, so overwhelmed that it can't keep up. The average housing court judge in a major city handles hundreds of cases. They have minutes to review each file. They can't investigate every claim, they can't verify every document, so they default to the process, follow the steps, give everyone their day in court, and while justice grinds forward, criminals profit. The political response has been predictably tribal. Conservatives point to this as proof that tenant protections have gone too far, that property rights have been eroded by progressive policies. Liberals argue that the real problem is lack of affordable housing, that squatting is a symptom of a deeper crisis. Both sides are talking past each other. The truth is that this isn't a left or right issue. It's a system failure that harms everyone except criminals. Some states are trying novel approaches. Oklahoma passed a law making squatting a felony with potential jail time. The conviction rate is still low, but the law has deterrent value. Texas allows property owners to use force to remove trespassers under certain circumstances, though this creates its own legal risks. Arizona requires squatters claiming adverse possession to have paid property taxes for the entire possession period, which eliminates most frivolous claims. These reforms help, but they're piecemeal. 50 different state laws create 50 different loopholes. What's needed is a fundamental rethinking of how we handle property disputes. First, we need clear distinction between tenants and trespassers. If someone has no written lease, no proof of payment, and no permission from the owner, they're not a tenant. They're a trespasser. Period. Police should be empowered to remove them immediately, the same way they'd remove someone breaking into a car. Second, we need fast track eviction processes for squatters. Not the months-long procedures designed for landlord-tenant disputes. A streamlined hearing within days, not months. Third, we need real criminal penalties. Squatting with fraudulent documents should be prosecuted as identity fraud and theft. Fourth, we need victim compensation funds. Property owners who successfully prove squatting should be able to recover legal costs and damages from the state if the squatter has no assets. But here's the reality. These reforms won't happen quickly because there's no political pressure. Squatting affects a relatively small percentage of property owners. It's not a voting issue for most Americans. The victims are scattered across different states and jurisdictions. There's no organized lobbying group for people whose homes have been squatted. Meanwhile, tenant advocacy groups, which do important work, resist any changes that might weaken eviction protections, even if those changes only target criminals. The system is stuck, so property owners adapt on their own. Some are selling properties they can't monitor regularly. Vacation homes, investment properties, inherited houses. Better to sell than risk squatters. This removes housing from the market and drives up prices. Some are converting vacant properties into short-term rentals with constant turnover, making them less attractive to squatters. This contributes to the affordable housing crisis by reducing long-term rental stock. Some are simply abandoning properties that have been squatted, walking away from mortgages because the legal fight isn't worth it. This creates blight and reduces property values in entire neighborhoods. The ripple effects touch everyone. When squatter risk increases, insurance premiums rise. When insurance rises, rent rises. When property owners can't trust the legal system to protect their rights, they exit the market. When properties sit vacant because owners are afraid to rent them, housing supply shrinks. The squatter crisis isn't just about individual victims. It's contributing to broader housing unaffordability and market dysfunction. And the crisis is accelerating. Zillow reports that searches for squatters' rights increased 300% between 2020 and 2024. News stories about squatters have gone from occasional curiosities to weekly occurrences. Social media amplification means every viral squatter story educates thousands of potential squatters about the opportunity. The awareness is spreading faster than the legal system can respond. There's a philosophical question at the heart of this that America hasn't confronted directly. What does property ownership actually mean? Most Americans would say that owning property means you control it. You decide who enters. You decide who stays. You can exclude others. It's yours. But the squatter crisis reveals that's not entirely true. Your property rights are only as strong as the system that enforces them. And when that system treats criminals like they have legitimate claims, when it takes months or years to remove someone who broke into your house, then ownership becomes conditional. You own the property on paper, but you don't control it in practice. This is more than a legal problem. It's an erosion of social contract. We're supposed to live in a society where rules matter, where property rights are protected, where the government prevents theft and punishes criminals. But when you call the police and they say there's nothing they can do, when you go to court and it takes a year to evict someone who committed a crime, when you lose your life savings to a scam that should never have been possible, you lose faith in the system. And that loss of faith has consequences that go far beyond any individual case. Some victims have taken matters into their own hands, and the results are predictable. Property owners confronting squatters physically, fights, assaults. In Texas, a property owner shot and killed a squatter who refused to leave. He was initially charged, though the charges were later dropped. In California, a landlord turned off utilities to force squatters out and was sued. She lost. In Florida, a property owner hired a group of men to forcibly remove squatters. He was arrested for orchestrating a home invasion. These stories are warnings. When the legal system fails, people resort to illegal measures, and everyone loses. The future of this crisis depends on whether we're willing to acknowledge reality. The reality that laws designed to protect tenants are being weaponized by criminals. The reality that property rights mean nothing if they're not enforced. The reality that the current system punishes victims and rewards predators. Until we're willing to make hard choices about reform, the crisis will continue to grow. So what happens next? If current trends continue, we'll see more states passing anti-squatter laws, but enforcement will remain weak. We'll see more property owners abandoning the rental market. We'll see more neighborhoods scarred by squatted properties. We'll see more victims bankrupted by a system that should protect them. And we'll keep asking ourselves how this is possible in America. The answer is uncomfortable. It's possible because we've built a system that values process over justice, that fears acting quickly more than it fears acting too late, that treats property crimes as mere inconveniences. It's possible because the people who write laws don't imagine their own homes being squatted. It's possible because fixing it would require political courage and legal reform that challenges powerful interest groups. But most of all, it's possible because we've forgotten something fundamental. Property rights aren't just about money or houses. They're about security. About knowing that what you've earned, what you've built, what you've inherited can't be taken by force or fraud. When that security disappears, everything else becomes uncertain. You can work your entire life, save every dollar, buy a home, and still lose it to someone who knows how to exploit the system better than you know how to protect yourself. That's the real lesson of the squatter crisis. The system isn't broken by accident. It's broken by design, by competing laws that were never meant to interact, by bureaucratic caution that prioritizes avoiding mistakes over achieving justice, by political paralysis that prevents reform. And until we decide that property owners deserve the same protection we give to criminals claiming to be tenants, the crisis will continue. The stranger in your living room isn't leaving, and the police still can't help you. Welcome to America, where squatters have more rights than you do,